Vampires, creatures of the night, seen as blood-sucking demons with human-like appearances, but have razor-sharp fangs or teeth where they pierce the blood arteries of their victims, draining them of their blood for nourishment. These creatures have common traits such as weaknesses, same causes of death. These creatures date back to, well, European folklore and have forever immortalized themselves in the horror genre. Vampires, of course, originate from the French word vampire, and since then the name has stuck. But in ancient folklores and the Middle Ages, during superstitious times, due to blood-related illnesses and forms of the plague, people genuinely believed that people that were sick were vampires, given their loss of appetites, their pale skin and bloodshot eyes, and would be buried with precautions such as bladed objects above their necks in case they tried to wake up, bricks thrown into their mouths to break their jaws and knock out their fangs. And this, of course, inspired many literatures to come, such as many infamous vampires, Dracula being the king of all vampires, created by Irish writer Bram Stoker, who took inspiration from infamous European prince Vlad the Impaler. But of course there's also the 1872 novella Camilla, which predates Dracula by 25 years, written by Sheridan Le Fun. And throughout the years, especially within the 20th century, vampires have gone on to evolve in literature and change ways and even adapt their own mythologies. In some mythologies, vampirism originated in the Mediterranean during Greek times. But, as I've said, different mythologies and different genres and works have retold the myths of vampires throughout the century. Of course, they have weaknesses, such as beheading, a wooden stake to the heart, and religious symbols, such as the cross, being ancient symbols of goodness, keeping devils compelled from evil, including vampires. Of course, vampires are believed to be works of the devil. When they are turned, their souls are lost, and as a constant reminder of this, their reflection from the mirror, which is meant to reflect the soul of the person they once were, is removed, believed to be owned by the devil, some calling it Old Nick's wink. Of course, these monsters have also other traits such as garlic, hating the smell of garlic. So when going to hunt for vampires or a vampire hunter, best consume a lot of garlic so it's in your paws. This method was actually inspired by mosquitoes, as if you eat a lot of garlic and it's in your paws, it works as a good propellant for mosquitoes. They must also consume blood to maintain their immortality, as they will grow old and look old, or simply die from starvation. But again, it all depends on what mythology of vampirism you look at, in what literature sense. Of course, burning in the sunlight is actually not as old as you think it is, as the whole trait about vampires burning in sunlight date back to the 1922 German expressionist film Nosferatu, where vampires burned, or the vampire Orlok burns in the sun. But before that, they were seen as blood-sucking demons in literature. It wasn't until 1897's Bram Stoker's novella Dracula vampires could have been granted supernatural abilities such as increased speed, strength, flight, even the ability to shapeshift into a bat or a wolf or even mist. Although Dracula did not burn in sunlight, but in the daytime, vampires are at their weakest as they do not have their full power. But as I said, the whole burning in the sunlight thing was a trope that came about in 1922. Of course, this would make a bit of sense that vampires don't burn in sunlight, given that the moon, the light of the moon, is the light of the sun reflecting on the moon. In the works of Anne Rice, vampires are depicted as partying forever, living through history. And of course, vampires, given that they are undead, they remain the same way they were when they returned from being human, meaning they will never age any further and will remain the same way they looked when they returned as human. Of course, there are the ways of a vampire being made is quite the simple procedure where a human can either consume vampire blood and slowly turn, or die with vampire blood in their system. But the most common traits, of course, are vampires consuming blood from the human and then feeding them back their vampiric blood. And then, sometime after, they reawaken as a vampire. Other ways vampires can be made is through witchcraft and curses that are bestowed upon them, where they would be forced to live for an eternity. And vampires, like I say, have been around in folklore, mythology, and literature for centuries, and I think long after we're gone, even in 100 years from now and beyond, vampires will still be told in stories and film and literature. So, in a sense, they are immortal creatures, because we still tell stories about these monsters to this very day.